So we're doing a review of Season 1 integration for Warzone, talking about how everything's gone. We're going to give you some pros and then maybe some of the negatives or cons of the update, or maybe things that they could work on in the future. For starters, I feel like the gameplay is very responsive. It feels much smoother now that the tac sprint's gone, much snappier, simpler controls. You don't really need to spam a bunch of things with the tac sprint and auto tac sprint, and the timings and the jumping feeling janky. Obviously, we had it really good in MW 2019's version of Warzone, and then MW3 felt like it was getting to that point, and then BO6's movement felt a little bit like sluggish, like there was delays everywhere. And this feels like they've taken the best of all of the movement and really kind of stepped it forward to make it feel more responsive. And not only in the movement, but weapon swapping feels a little bit smoother, even opening doors and opening crates. I don't know how they did it, but the delays or whatever they had feels like significantly less of them. And I think the game feels much better because of that. I think Haven's Hollow kind of got a bad rap right from the beginning. A lot of people went to go play it in July, and then I got to play it early at COD Next, and we didn't really even get to show off that much of it, and there was a lot of negative sentiment around it, and it looks like they were able to address most, if not all, the issues to make the map play significantly better, sped up the pace with the player count, and then they have like a dozen different Easter eggs that people are trying to solve for different cosmetics or XP or even specialists, similar to like what we had with Fortune's Keep. They had a ton of Easter eggs, and then even Rebirth Island still has a ton of Easter eggs. I don't know how they did it, but that ended up being a much better map than I think we initially thought it was going to be, especially with some of the negative sentiment around some of the reused assets, as people were calling it, a few of the zombies things. But even with that, they had to redo them entirely because they don't even function how they do in zombies. So either way, they made it work. At least for now, it feels good. I think Rebirth Island will still be a little bit more popular just because it's always been that thing with COD for whatever reason. That's what people gravitate towards. But I think Haven's Hollow offers a little bit different gameplay loop and how you rotate and how big the map is and a lot of those variables that I think even that one might play a little bit better for ranked than it does on than ranked does on Rebirth Island. But we'll have to kind of wait and see on that one. The meta is also super refreshing. I didn't really think they were going to nail it quite as well as they did. Obviously, we've had plenty of integrations where they say they're going to do certain things, but this was the first time Raven had full control over the attachments, the damage values, the loadout, everything pretty much. And they actually delivered pretty good. I wasn't sure, like even when I did the stat testing and I put out the breakdown on the loadouts, I got a chance to use them all and it felt pretty good. But now that I've had more time to play it, seen more gameplay, it's kind of one of those things where they definitely hit a sweet spot. I still think they have a ways to go to get like even more fine-tuned, because there's a lot of fun options with meta builds for long range, close range. Pretty good variety there. I don't know how necessarily how the snipers pan out just yet. The floor loot has been pretty good. I think you could pick up tons of different weapons on the floor loot. Obviously, there's the occasional shotgun or sniper or whatever, but for the most part, floor loot is probably one of the better states, at least in my opinion. And then for default loadouts, they ended up looking pretty good as well. I kind of skimmed through them to kind of see what they offered. They even include a Maddox that is part of the battle pass, that you could just start using that right away until you unlock it. And that's on top of the battle pass being faster than ever to get the weapons unlocked in those first free tiers that you can unlock as a free-to-play player, or whatever you want to call it, where you don't actually pay for the battle pass. You can still get those tiers significantly faster because they cut that down. But that's more of a Call of Duty thing. That they've sped that up, not necessarily Warzone, so we won't talk too much on that. I think tying into the meta loadout conversation is the changes to the creative class. It's much simpler. I still think and advocate for them doing 5 attachments and a free optic if somebody wants it. So in those cases where you have an ugly SMG iron sight, you can still run an optic and not feel like you're losing out on an important attachment. And then the long range, I think that would clear it up a little bit to make sure you get the right amount of recoil, bullet velocity, and those types of things, and still get an optic. But that's something I think they'll do later. I think having the 8 attachment thing was cool to make your gun feel like it's much stronger, and it would be pretty broken in the current way the attachments work, because you have so many that can reduce recoil, so many for bullet velocity and other stats that BO6 just didn't offer and maximize on that end. So very often you only really needed 6 attachments, then you kind of had to throw 2 on because you had the free slots, not necessarily because you wanted them. But the bigger issue, I think, with the 8 attachments was the UI nonsense, where if you had classes with wildcard for overkill and some for primary gunfighter, you end up equipping a gun and then it messes up that build, and that build got messed up with this one, and then you really meant to use 5 and it creates an error, it drops the other one. It created a lot of issues. If you played the game this year, you know that those were tons of nonsense issues, unless you just only had primary gunfighter or only had overkill. Created some of these inconsistencies in the thing, and then you end up with too many builds, and then you couldn't create so many issues with that. And I'm glad that's solved. I'm glad they reworked the perks. I'm still a little unsure if Ghost is really gonna fit the way it is now, because a lot of the other things are sound interesting and have been interesting or feel fun, but Ghost countering even an advanced UAV, which requires 3 UAVs, or the special actual icon if you get it through an Easter egg or something like that, for an advanced UAV by itself, is countered entirely by Ghost as long as the person is moving and doesn't stop moving for a length of 1.5 seconds, which is pretty broken in my opinion, but that's going to be more in the negative section. We've kind of already dabbled in it here. I think the XP gains have been fast, especially for a lot of people that don't get BO7. They start at level 1. You level up insanely fast. Like 1 kill gets you like 3 calling cards, and it stacks up tons of XP, which I think is good. I think on top of that, you're also getting a ton of XP on the weapon side. My weapons are pretty much max, so I didn't really get to experience that the same way. And I don't really have any weapons that I want to prestige and start with no attachments in Warzone at this point. I do that in zombies on a double XP weekend or something like that. Farm some zombies, get some free XP, and do a little bit of a mindless grind to farm those levels if I want to prestige and get those prestige camos or whatever the case is. I think the weekend LTMs are a pretty cool concept, and I'm glad they're experimenting with the movement, in the sense where you can do the wall jump, get the grapple hook, but also experiment with how those things play on the weekend with some of the more fan favorite ones. Like they brought back buyback. They're going to experiment with some other ones. They've already kind of laid us out with the 5-week roadmap that kind of gives us an idea of what they're going to be doing. Aim assist nerfed has also been positive. It feels like the gunfights are a little bit more organic, a little bit more fair. You do have to actually work to aim now. I feel like that was a little bit lost. Since MW 2019, which that got juiced to 200 meters and felt pretty strong. It got strong rotation. BO6 modified that, weakened the close range within that first 5-10 meters. And then now it's been scaled out and improved in that regard, where it's even more fine-tuned to feel a little bit more human and less aimbot than it was before. And I think there's still going to be instances where aim assist definitely feels strong, but they've kind of modified that a little bit to be a little bit smoother. We won't spend a ton of time on it, but I think there has been minimal bugs or crashes. I know certain setups, maybe you have more crashes than others, but in terms of the general populace, it feels like the general bugs and crashes is much lower than any integration that we've ever had. And this update reminds me a lot of the Season 3 update where Verdansk dropped that first month, but then they went and messed everything up in the Reloaded update. So hopefully it stays good and we don't have that same issue, because that would be right around the holidays when they're on vacation, and it'd be a big problem. So as we say that, we'll go ahead and get into some of the negatives or the cons of the update. So with the negatives, it's pretty straightforward. I think Ghost needs still a little bit of a tweak. I think what they decided to go with, it makes it a little bit too overpowered. The fact that you stay off an advanced UAV, I'll just double down and say that doesn't really make much sense, that you could invest all that. What's the point of advanced UAV then if regular Ghost works? Like, why would you ever do that? I like the trade-off of that. Ghost, if it's going to stay in its current state as overpowered as it is, they need to make that movement thing half second instead of a 1.5 seconds. I think the other change they did, kind of like without basically notifying anything until we got to the day of, is the lack of self revives and gas mask. I think that change is a little bit one that does shake up how people play the game. Self revives could be a little bit wonky. I get the argument to get rid of those or keep those or whatever, but gas mask, I feel like those are an integral part of the game, and they're influencing so many different gameplay decisions that removing those really remove some ability to play the game in a certain way. If the people felt like they lasted too long, just make sure durables aren't in the game. If they still think that the regular one's too long, maybe cut the time on there, even though I don't think it's particularly long. But whatever it is, there's ways to nerf the gas mask without completely removing it entirely and removing that piece of gameplay. So those are some of those important parts. I think the download issue that the game has, that only Call of Duty has, you pre-download, and then the day of, then you have to install. Then you get into the game and it says downloading shaders, and then update requires restart. And then you got to download something else, and then it's got to install. Then you get back into the game, and then update requires restart. And then once you get back in, downloading shaders. Wait, and now you can play the game. So they got to figure that out. It's a Call of Duty problem. That's been every update. I don't understand it. I've played 30 games this year and thousands in my lifetime. No other game but Call of Duty does this. So that should be a fix. The other part is the playlist part of it. There's a couple parts in this. One is the playlist rotation, being between the two new the new map, Haven's Hollow and Rebirth Island. Not necessarily a fan of. Leave Rebirth quads or something like that, and then do all the options for Haven's Hollow. I don't think people really like the rotation. I'm personally not a fan of it. There's more than enough people that play Call of Duty despite the Steam numbers. There are a gajillion people on console. There's more than enough to run the playlist. And getting to playlists being available, one of the issues is in certain regions, they aren't available. And this creates a lot of issues because I go through my blog, I read it, I read the patch notes. It says solos, duos, trios, quads. And then I'm get sent video, people saying, I don't have those options. What's going on? And they're out of region. So I get that outer region doesn't always have all the playlists like North America or Europe or whatever the case is most populated, but those should be annotated on the blog. So I think they could do a better job of communicating in that regard. I think the other part is a lot of people feel like there's not a lot of content in here. And I agree. Outside of Haven's Hollow and adding the new weapons, yes, there's a lot of changes to the systems and stuff like that, but the actual content feels a little bit lackluster, especially on Verdansk, with 2 POIs and one's being a redone POI that we've had already. I think overall, there's things that they can do communication wise where there's an expectation that people aren't expecting a big map at the integration. That we know that we're already giving Avalon in season 2 or something like that. I think with Blackout 2, we're getting overhauled Verdansk or changes to Verdansk. We're also getting changes to Rebirth Island with the snow and stuff like that. So we're going to have a lot of maps. I don't know how file size is going to work. Haven's Hollow, hopefully we still be here. We're going to get ranked play. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on in the next update in terms of content. It just hopefully they don't mess it up, right? The other part with untapping onto playlist is Plunder's gone. I usually use Plunder for testing. I wouldn't care besides that really, but a lot of people love Plunder. For whatever reason, they love it, and they message me daily saying, hey, where's Plunder? What happened to Plunder? Are they bringing back Plunder? Is Plunder gone? So hopefully they resolve that or make some comms on that, because I think a lot of people actually do in fact play Plunder. One other thing, which is the elephant in the room, and this could have gone in the pros or the cons section because it's still too early to kind of really lay this out there, and this is Ricochet. Is it doing a good job or not? Personally, I feel like it's doing a better job. Is it a good job? I mean, it depends on what your expectation is. Some people do in fact think that there should be 0 cheaters in any online game ever, and if the game's not doing that, then it's a failure. If I'm not running them regularly, I don't see it as an issue, but yes, they need to go ahead and make sure they're attacking this. It's still a couple days. I'm sure the cheat providers are going to be out in full force trying to figure out how to kick Ricochet's ass, but at the meantime, it seems like it's a good start for Ricochet, and they're not being embarrassed quite yet, and hopefully they got something to combat that once the cheaters do combat it, because they don't have a really good strong track record. So we'll see kind of where it goes. Let me know if I missed any positives or negatives. See you on the next one. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.